So I'm going to be so bold as to say this. It is a myth then to say that worship is only applicable to God. We've kind of created that idea in our own minds and time and our traditions. It's not true. We have misappropriated these things, I think. Now, I do know this, and we can say this, and we won't divert on this too much, but we're going to say you don't worship angels. That's pretty clear. And I can't really, you might could figure out some example of that somewhere, but I think generally speaking, you don't worship angels. John, the Revelator, bowed before this, I don't know if it was an angel, a creature, a being of heaven, some way. But anyway, and he said, no, I'm your fellow servant. Notice the emphasis on servant. Okay. But the other then, I think we can go for this too. You don't worship men. Acts 10:25. Remember where Peter came into the house of Cornelius, that good man, and Cornelius fell at his feet. That's wonderful. And Peter said, oh, for goodness sakes, get up. I'm just a man like you. And so we're going to say then you wouldn't worship a man normally. Notice I've thrown that word normally in. You can see what you think. I think many times we find things that are principles, but you also have to look, are there any biblically stated exceptions? You don't go making up your own exceptions, because then that could be making up your own deception. But are there biblically stated exceptions to something? Anyway, so there can be exceptions. I think on this business of worship, there is. And I think the exception is this. It can be men of high station, I'm saying, high position, and particularly kings, royalty, princes. Even though we don't worship men, we don't think about that normally, and especially men who are not, are just like us, so that's great. Even an apostle, you don't get to worship the apostle Peter, okay? But on the other hand, God has given kings their positions, their throne. His throne really belongs to him, actually. And royalty, he's given them their station, their place as leaders and so on of the people. So there's tons of examples. How's that for a little exaggeration for effect?
The presenter, Dan Gill, starts off by saying that worship cannot be the worship of angels, which the Bible teaches clearly that we should not worship angels. And so he's right there. And then he says that we shouldn't worship men either. And he starts explaining how even the apostles were not to be worshipped. And that is correct also. The Bible clearly teaches that. But then he says that royalty and kings can be worshipped because God has given this special honor. And the answer to that is no. It's ridiculous, because the royalty or kings are men also. And men cannot receive the glory that only God can receive.
The temptation of Jesus in the desert by Satan. Luke 4:8 says, Jesus told the devil, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve."
If you have a Bible concordance, or you have one of those computer programs that can give you all the verses at one glance, type in the word worship and see, it's going to give you 108 times where the word worship is mentioned. And in all those places, you will never find where there is a worship of the kings or queens or royalty. Not one place. Now the trickery here is that the presenter gives some verses where the people or one person, they called the king my lord. But the word my lord or lord can be used not only for God, but can be used for royalty. And it does not mean that when they're calling the king Lord, that they're saying, "You're my God." That is not what's happening there. That's a false interpretation. because the Lord can be used in those different ways. And the same thing with bowing down. Bowing down can be interpreted as worship, but if you follow the dictionary and you follow the examples in the Bible, people would bow down to royalty, to the kings and to the queens out of respect and honor. But that's it. They wouldn't worship the king or the queen or any royalty. They would not worship them as they worship God. Give you an example. Abraham, when he worshiped the Lord, he made an altar every single time that he worshiped God. Did he ever make an altar for any king? Did he ever worship any king and made an altar to honor the king? The answer is no. And the same thing goes for all the other verses. The presenter gives us verses where they put their face to the ground, they prostrated themselves before the king. And in one place it says before the Lord and the king. So right there he's assuming, oh, they're worshiping God and the king the same way. That would be idolatry. That will go against the commandments in Exodus 20. It will go against that because God clearly says not to worship anyone else but only God. So the king is honored alongside of God, but God is given the supreme worship. This is the truth. And you cannot mix them and say, well, I'm going to worship the king as I worship God, because then God would deal with you severely. Severely. And when kings and royalty do not give glory to God, God judges them severely, because the glory is only for the Lord.
Exodus 20, 3-5. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. This implies men and women also. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them.
So to say that kings can be worshipped the same as God is not only false, but it makes idolaters out of all Unitarians. Because if a king shows up in our country, then the Unitarians are going to bow down and worship, because they believe that kings can be worshipped. And that's a big no-no. The truth of the matter is that Unitarians are trying to hide their biggest mistake. Their biggest mistake is that they teach that kings can be worshipped, and they do this because since they teach that Jesus Christ is not God, they have to find a way to worship him, because the Bible has many examples of Jesus Christ being worshipped and exalted. And so they have to come up with something to say, okay, we can worship Jesus also, even though he's not God. That is the reason that they're teaching that men cannot be worshipped, but royalty or kings can be worshipped. And that is the biggest fabrication that they have made up to date.